Welcome, everyone. Today we're talking about shame, but probably not in the way that you're used to hearing about it. Most people think shame is just an emotion, but shame is often a full nervous system survival response tied to belonging, attachment, safety, identity, and worth. And when shame gets activated, most of us don't consciously choose how we respond. The pattern fires automatically. Maybe you withdraw, maybe you shut down. Maybe you become defensive, maybe you over-explain, maybe you collapse, maybe you chase reassurance, and maybe you become controlling. And maybe you do all of the above at varying points in time. What I want you to help you understand today is that these reactions are not random. They're adaptive strategies your nervous system learned long ago to help protect you from emotional pain. And once you can begin recognizing the pattern in real time, you gain the ability to respond differently. One of the most important truths I can offer you is this: your shame is a conditioned and automatic response, meaning that by the time you consciously realize you're upset, your nervous system has often already selected a protective strategy. This is subconscious and it's running in the background. So it's not like you're sitting there thinking, oh, I should do this. So this is why people will often say things like, I don't know why I reacted like that. I knew I was overreacting, but I couldn't help myself. I became someone else in that moment. Because these reactions are extremely old as in old in your body, as in they've been around for a very long time. They're deeply conditioned preconditions your nervous system learned about what keeps you safe emotionally. So, when shame is triggered, we automatically protect ourselves. When worth feels questioned, it doesn't just hurt. Protective strategies activate automatically to restore a sense of safety. That's the important piece to recognize and understand. Your reaction isn't random, and your reaction is not proof that there's something wrong with you or that you don't know that you're broken in some way. Your nervous system is simply attempting to solve a problem. It's trying to restore dignity, your sense of belonging and safety, um, to help you feel in control again, to reestablish connection, or to protect you from rejection, helplessness, humiliation, or abandonment. The problem is that many of these strategies that once protected you now damage intimacy, communication, and connection. So this slide shows how fast the pattern actually happens, right? So there's an upsetting event, there's an emotional spike, you make it mean something, and then you have an adaptive response. And this entire process often happens in seconds, and then, of course, the fallout continues to perpetuate over the ensuing hours or days, depending on how large the incident was. So it could be something like somebody giving you negative feedback, somebody pulling away, someone seeming disappointed with you, somebody misunderstanding you. And instantly your nervous system interprets danger, your body reacts, your mind creates a story, and your protective strategy activates. This is why shame responses can feel so overwhelming. The body reacts before conscious thought fully catches up. This framework is based on Terry Reil's relationship grid. If you have a chance, go over and check out his website. There's a massive amount of information there. He has been one of my greatest teachers in understanding many of the relational boundary and self-esteem dynamics. And learning this from him was one of the first times I actually started to recognize and understand why I behaved the way I did. So you can find him at terryreal.com, and I will provide a link in the comment section below. So, what I love about this is that it helps us understand that people generally organize around two core dynamics that intersect. So, you have self esteem on the north south axis, and you have boundaries on the east west axis. When shame activates, people tend to move into one of four adaptive strategies. And Terry has taken time to map this out. And I think he said he came up with 13 to 20 different variations. But we're going to keep it really clean and simple for this presentation, and keeping with the original four quadrants that he explains. So some people protect themselves by becoming emotionally walled off. Some people protect themselves by collapsing or disappearing. Some soothe themselves through validation and approval. And some soothe themselves through control, intensity, or emotional dominance. So in the top of the quadrant, you have an inflamed sense of self-esteem where you believe that the other person's the issue. And in the bottom section, you have a deflated sense of self-esteem where you internalize everything as yourself being the problem. On the east-west axis, on the east side, you have no boundaries at all. And on the west side, you are completely and totally walled off. So none of these strategies make you inherently a bad person. They are adaptive attempts at emotional survival. They are what you learned as a child, and they elicited the best quality of care in your family of origin, meaning that when you responded in one of these sections, you felt the safest and most connected with your parents or your immediate caregivers. So let's walk through them. So the first one is the top left-hand quadrant, which is walled off with an inflated sense of self-esteem. This is the woman who protects herself through dominance and disconnection. At her core, she learned that vulnerability feels dangerous. So dependence feels dangerous, needs feel dangerous, emotional exposure feels dangerous. So she survives becoming highly self-sufficient, emotionally guarded, competent, composed, and difficult to truly access. Very often these women are high functioning. They're capable, insightful, successful, and strong. But underneath that strength is often a profound fear of being hurt, controlled, humiliated, or destabilized. When deep shame gets activated in this woman, the nervous system usually moves toward control and distance. She may emotionally shut down, become cold or detached, become defensive, over-explain, intellectualize, criticize, judge, emotionally disconnect, or convince herself she's never cared in the first place. The underlying message is often, if I become untouchable, I'll be safe. And this is important. Many women in this quadrant don't recognize themselves as hurt. They recognize themselves as irritated, frustrated, disappointed, or exhausted. Quite often they're annoyed, and they feel quite aloof. But underneath is often shame and the fear of vulnerability. So on the same side of the boundary equation, so on the west side, on the southwest corner, we have walled off and deflated self-esteem. It's this one, right? So this woman also protects herself through disconnection. But instead of moving upward into dominance or control, she moves downward into collapse, retreat, and invisibility. At her core, she believes I'm too much, I'm unwanted, I'm burdensome, I'm not safe, I'll probably be rejected. So instead of protecting herself through superiority, she protects herself through withdrawal. When shame activates here, the system tends to collapse inward. She may disappear emotionally, isolate, shut down, numb out, dissociate, minimize herself, or convince herself not to need anything at all. So instead of you're the problem, the internal message becomes I'm the problem. And often these women become extremely self silencing. They stop advocating for themselves almost immediately because expressing needs feels dangerous. And this is like depression territory. It's learned helplessness. Why bother trying anything because it's not going to help anyway? The next quadrant is boundaryless and inflated sense of self-esteem. So this quadrant is very different. This woman regulates herself through connection, influence, attention, admiration, and emotional significance. She often appears very charismatic, warm, magnetic. She's emotionally expressive, seductive. She's intensely caring, really high energy and highly relational. But underneath identity stability depends on feeling important, desired, needed, chosen, or emotionally central. When shame activates here, the system often moves towards intensified connection. So, what you're seeing here is more texting, processing, emotional urgency, a lot of persuasion, a lack of attunement to the person that they're with. In all of these, you see that, but especially with this one, because quite often these behaviors can be overwhelming and you can be overwhelming to the other person. And so you see a lot of pursuit and intensity, which the other person may feel very, very overwhelmed by. And there's a lack of attunement on the part of the person that's perpetuating. So she may overhelp, overfunction, move into rescuing, psychoanalyzing, seducing, emotionally flooded, or struggle to tolerate space and distance. So there's a constant need to move into reconnecting, and quite often that escalates situations instead of taking time out and finding time to regulate and um, maintain a sense of become re-regulated and then move back into repair. Quite often it escalates situations. Because for them, closeness regulates the safety, right? They're co-regulating with the other person, and as soon as the other person is removed, they start to feel distressed, deeply distressed. So the underlying message becomes if I can restore connection, importance, or emotional significance, I'll feel okay again. And the final quadrant is boundaryless and deflated sense of self-esteem. So now we're in the southeast corner of the grid. So this is your classic self-abandonment pattern. Terry describes it as the kind of Marilyn Monroe complex. This woman learned that connection requires accommodation, that love requires self-sacrifice, and that safety comes from keeping other people happy, comfortable, connected, or emotionally regulated. So she prioritizes connection over self-protection and self-abandons in order to maintain the connection. When shame activates here, the nervous system usually moves towards appeasement, right? So she may people please, apologize really, really quickly, even if she recognizes that it's not her fault. There's a lot of reassurance seeking, over explaining, over functioning, abandoning her own needs. So this person is overly attuned to the other person, right? She's overly attuned to the other person and how the other person's behaving, and she's under attuned to what's going on inside of herself and what she's needing. And quite often there's a panic when connection feels threatened. So the underlying fear is if I lose connection, I lose love, safety, or worth. And that's really disorienting, right? Many women in this quadrant become extraordinarily attuned to everyone else while becoming deeply disconnected from themselves. So we're going to move into the reflection part of the exercise. So we call it slowing the surge, witnessing your default behavior in real time. So now comes the important part. Most people spend their lives reacting automatically. Uh, Terry calls that first consciousness, right? So that whoosh feeling, and you're off to the races. Second consciousness is where you actually start witnessing what's happening. So that's where healing starts, when we slow the pattern down enough to witness it consciously. This is not about shaming ourselves for the reaction, but actually beginning to understand it, why it's there. So I'm going to walk you through the exercise now. So step one is naming the moment. So I want you to think of a recent moment where you felt emotionally activated. What happened? This is like the sports play-by-play, right? What actually happened? Who were the people there? What was said? What was explicitly said by the other person or people? And what was implied, right? Because we have two levels of communication. What was body language saying? Um, and most importantly, what did you think the other person was seeing, judging, rejecting, or misunderstanding about you? So if you want to pause here for a moment, you can journal your thoughts about this. And if you have the workbook, you can work through that. If you don't have the workbook, you can send me an email or comment in the messages, and I'll get one off to you. So step two is tracking the surge. So I want you to pause and notice what happened in your body in that moment. So we're talking about the physiology. Did your chest tighten? Did your stomach drop? That's a common one, right? Like you feel that kind of stomach go flip-floppy and you feel kind of nauseous. Did your face get hot? Mine always does. I turn bright red. I feel that kind of flush move up my face, down my neck, into my chest. Do you feel your jaw clench? Maybe your mind goes blank. Maybe you move into freeze, and you're not able to track what's going on in real time. Maybe you move into fight and you're getting really, really defensive. Maybe you move into flight and you're like, I just need to get out of here. Did you suddenly feel small, exposed, trapped, furious, ashamed, desperate, emotionally flooded? The body often tells the truth before your mind does, right? So pause the video there and take some time to journal your thoughts on that one, and then we'll move on to the next exercise. So step three is identify your first impulse. So before you had time to think, what did your system want to do, right? When you feel the energy of what's going on, are you like gravitating toward the person, or are you wanting to get away? Is there a leaning in or a leaning out? Are you feeling collapsed, or are you jumping to defense? Do you feel you need to explain yourself to prove yourself? Or are you shutting down? Are you wanting to push harder, demanding explanations or understanding, wanting to regain control? Or do you just really want to get out of there? So that first impulse really matters. It's going to kind of show you where on the grid you're popping to first. Quite often you see kind of like this two-step move, like you immediately jump into defensiveness and over-explaining, and then you recognize that your conversation isn't getting anywhere, and then you're moving over into walled off and one down, completely collapsed, where you're like, it doesn't matter, nobody hears me anyways, I need to get out of here. So because that initial kind of impulse reveals your strategy that your nervous system learned long ago. So take some time and pause the video, do a little bit of journaling on that, and then we're moving into number 4, which is ask what the impulse was protecting. This is really, really important to understand. All behavior exists for a reason. In our Western culture, we just want to like force ourselves and hustle ourselves into changing our behavior. I'm going to, dominate this and I'm going to make it change. But we fail to recognize is that all of those behaviors exist for a reason. And if we don't kind of like flush out what it's there for and try to change our behavior, things can go sideways really, really quickly. We can get a lot of internal blowback. So it's really important to take the time to stop and recognize what the behavior is actually protecting for you. Is it safety, dignity, belonging, control, understanding, worth? Protection from rejection, protection from feeling helpless. Your reaction's not random, and it's an attempt to solve something emotionally important, right? So if something's scary in the moment and you're feeling really upset and you don't know how to verbalize that, you don't know how to set boundaries around the way you want to be treated, or you don't feel that you're worthy enough to express yourself, these what were in childhood adaptive behaviors become maladaptive as an adult, because instead of saying, what you're doing right now is upsetting me, I'm overwhelmed, I can't quite understand or process, I need some time to step back and kind of get clear about what's going on for me before we continue this conversation, right? We didn't have those words as a child. So all we had was our ability to navigate the situation. So take a few minutes to see if you can't recognize and understand what the behavior is trying to protect you from. So what I want you to do now is step 5 is find the real need. So once your nervous system settles, we can often recognize the actual need underneath the reaction, right? It's why your granny told you to step away from a situation, take some time to have a cup of tea, and then come back to it a little bit later on. Because when you do that, your nervous system has time to kind of like relax, become a little more coherent again, become regulated, and you start to see things a little bit more clearly. You move out of kind of like that reptilian brain response and back into your frontal cortex where you're processing and moving through all the parts of your brain to make sense of what's going on. So see if you can't give words to what you are actually needing in that moment. Reassurance, space, understanding, validation, respect, safety, softness, maybe accountability, right? Somebody did something that upset you and they're not taking accountability for it. Maybe you needed repair or something happened and you don't need accountability, but you just need for somebody to say, I'm really, really sorry I hurt you. Or maybe you need emotional clarity. The healthier response usually begins when we stop organizing around the productive strategy and start communicating the actual need, right? So we can witness the behavior unfolding, and the more that we do that, the faster we can get at naming it, slowing it down, recognizing what we really need in the moment, and finding the vocabulary and way of expressing what it is that we need. It's a practice that takes time. The first time you do it, it's going to feel kind of funny. It may come out all garbled and not really very intellectual. But the reality is all of this is a practice, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. So I always find it really, really important to move into, um, we all know what we do that's not so great. But quite often we behave the way we behave because a healthier version was never modeled for us, right? And so a lot of us don't even know what a healthy way of moving through these situations is. So number 5 is looking at connected and protected behavior. So this is our goal. The goal is not to become emotionless. Quite often, that whole conversation around regulating, people interpret that as, being automatons, completely and totally unemotionless and just being able to navigate something. Um, and that is not the goal. The goal is to really become proficient at moving through these situations when things go sideways. So the goal is not to become endlessly accommodating or to be untouchable, but becoming connected and protected at the same time. Secure functioning allows you to stay emotionally open, remain connected to yourself and the other person, to communicate honestly, to tolerate discomfort, to maintain healthy boundaries, and move toward repair instead of protection alone. Quite often we weren't taught about repair, right? All relationships are harmony, disharmony, repair. Quite often we interpret disharmony as something being dreadfully wrong when it's actually just a really normal aspect of human relating. And so the trick is not to move through life without any bumps. The trick is to know how to repair and say sorry and take active um, agency within our relationships. Um, so even securely attached people still experience shame. Um, the difference is that shame no longer completely organizes their behavior. So they feel the shame, but there's more pause. There's more awareness, more regulation, more honesty, more repair. You see this with Brene Brown, like, wow. She's just a beautiful walking model of how to move through that response of that shame storm. So instead of collapsing, controlling, pursuing, withdrawing, or abandoning themselves, they can stay connected to both themselves and the relationship at the same time. So the final exercise is number 6, choose a healthier route. This is where the conscious practice begins, right? How do I not, and how do I never get triggered again? Newsflash, there's the punchline. You will never not get triggered, right? There's always going to be something come up that upsets us. But the trick is to figure out how to communicate the real need more cleanly to myself and to the people around me. So instead of punishing or disappearing, defending, controlling, appeasing, or becoming emotionally flooded, can I slow down enough to say, I'm hurt, I feel ashamed, I need a moment, I need reassurance, I need space, I want understanding, I care about this relationship, and I don't want to react automatically. So that's the work there. So take a few minutes to journal, process, and look at how you've responded to date and how you would actually like to change that. So the reframe here is that your reaction is not the problem. Your reaction is always data, and the work is learning what what it was trying to protect you from, and finding a healthier way to communicate so that you're able to stay connected and protected. And so that's all. Thanks for joining me today. This is part 4 in a larger series, so take a look at the Becoming Shameless playlist, and you can follow along for some other videos.